COVID impacted us heavily. Rio de Janeiro, which is my city and where I live and work, has the highest lethality rate in the country. And Brazil has been horrible in managing the pandemic. The, this affected even more people who live in favelas, wherein the recommendation of physical distance is impossible to be followed. Houses are super close to each other, and working from home is a luxury, and many of them don't have it. Wi-Fi connection are bad and non-existent, and the type of work that usually people who lives in this area does is much more intensive and demands they go to the office. In the favelas, due to the scenario and the speed of the spread of the virus, many people start to organize themselves to creating food banks, distribution of food, hand sanitizer, and even soap. Some of them even build some sinks in the street and the corners of the favela to help and to promote people washing their hands. It's this movement that are like being trained and fostered between grassroots organizations, and local organization, and the communities. It especially helps to reinforce the social fabric, the local fabric, and created and build on the sense of community and the importance of neighborhoods and your surrounds. After the pandemic, I kept wondering how we're going to keep this momentum, how we're going to promote this even more in the communities, and how we're going to go build after this. Like Rio is such a diverse city with high inequality, then unfortunately will tends to increase. How we can use and promote local leadership, not only to serve as an example, but also to unite the city and to build social cohesion beyond the communities and go in the entire city. I work for the Rio local government, and I believe the power of public policy to overcome many of the issues that my city and its citizens faces. Although the government is key and the main actor to implement public policy and to promote change in a big scale, grassroots movements and local organizations are fundamental stakeholders. Local leaders, especially women's leaders, are so important, especially the majority of Brazilian households is formed and led by single moms. So they are central element to design public policy that actually can make a difference. Government is important to facilitate this process and engage all the stakeholders and to scale up besides the implementation. But the civic space has to be enlarged and has to be enlarged to embrace diversity and the real representation of the Brazilian society, not only white middle-class men. So as women are the drivers of family and communities, but they don't have a seat on the table. They are not decision makers, or they don't have a place or role in the implementation of policies. So how we can involve more women in the civic space? This absence is madness because it results in the public policies that are almost designed to fail. Another thing then the pandemic is making me think about it is the next one. Unfortunately, we're gonna see a next pandemic in the future. I hope in the far, far away future, but we have to be more prepared. We have to handle them, the next one, in the more strategical and efficient way than we are handling this one. And we have to plan more to avoid this last minute decision and rush decision. And I kept wondering this because of schools. Education, everybody says that education is the main and the most and fundamental stone on the building of society. But when the pandemic hit us, the first thing that we closed were the schools. And the last thing that we opened are the schools. So what kind of society we are when the education is left to be addressed and to be handled after bars and restaurants are open. I'm not saying the bars and restaurants and offices are not important, but they should not be a priority. How are we gonna operate and handle the fact that kids are being 1 year without schools? How are we gonna ask and request our students to stay 1 year at home and study from home when many of them, millions of them, don't have internet or have bad connection or don't have a computer or don't have even a house with food? Or many of them don't have a parents that can stay with them during working hours. How are we gonna heal our children now they miss so much? And this is not only the education by the classrooms by itself, the learning process, but also in terms of nutrition and food. Schools in Brazil serve 3 meals per day. And these 3 meals are quite balanced and nutrition and very good. And many of these people, they are the only meals they have in the life. They don't have food at home. So it was 1 year without education and 1 year without proper meals. So these kids, after this, and especially with high dropout rates, how are we going to convince them to go back to school? I don't have the answer, and I don't think we have it now. But I think we have to start talking about this and debated this. I also think after the pandemic and how we're going to stop talking about COVID and start talking about other necessary and urgent issues as environment. Probably the next pandemic probably will come from climate change or climate change related issues like deforestation. How we can engage people to talk and to promote change. Normally, and we have been talking about climate change in a kind of catastrophe manner, terrifying manner, like extinction, global warming, the humanity will end, the next big extinction of animals. So we have been using these horrifying words and this horrifying narrative. Instead of this promoting engaging of people, is actually promoted disengaging, because people say like, okay, the world will end anyway, so I'm not gonna do nothing. I'm just gonna live my life because there is nothing to do. So how we can reverse this narrative to promote engagement? From women's stories, then we are looking and seeing the difference. If you go, for instance, for the Amazon forest, is like the biggest forest, tropical forest in the world. Many of the communities, local, quite like indigenous community, traditional communities, they're led by women. They're led by women, and many of them, they're creating revenue from forest product instead of deforestation. So they're creating alternative economics and alternative governance models in the local level that can actually make good case and inspiring way to show how engaged and local participation and even civic space in a quite small scale can be used to promote a sustainable development. And I think we can and should change the narrative from a catastrophe one to an inspire one, using the examples of woman leadership to promote this. And I think with that, we can actually promote more engagement, people more in the fight to reduce the climate change and mitigate its impacts, and put pressure on government to act, but also acted as themselves in the society.